Hello everyone. Today in this video we are going to take a look at the 5 major parts of the Earth system. In the last video we introduced you to Earth science and we did mention these briefly, and I mentioned also the fact that if you affect any one of the Earth's 5 systems, then you're going to put the others in jeopardy also. It's a situation that we're seeing today with climate change. So part of what we do here in this science course is to try to get you to understand the interactions that these 5 systems have as they work together on this planet. So just for a quick review, the 5 major parts of the Earth's system include the biosphere, which is all the life on this planet, the hydrosphere, all the water, the geosphere, which includes all the land, all the rock on the planet, the atmosphere, and finally, the anthrosphere. So let's run through these quickly so that you can get a good idea of what's contained within each one. And also, I think I'll be giving you some examples here of some interactions between these systems. All right, so first, in order to understand the Earth system and these separate spheres that interact, we need to get a good solid definition for what a system is. So in science, we define a system as an organized group of parts that work together to form a whole. So the atmosphere is the first Earth system that we're going to take a look at. Atmo is a Greek prefix meaning air. So the atmosphere is the mixture of gases that surrounds and protects the Earth. Now the atmosphere is made up of 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, also in some smaller amounts, carbon dioxide, water vapor, and methane. Now, I listed carbon dioxide, water vapor, and methane in red because collectively these gases are the greenhouse gases, and I'll be showing you that here in a second. But how do we study the Earth's atmosphere? Well, we study it with things like weather balloons, airplanes. We have hurricane hunters who study atmospheric process during those weather events in airplanes, and we also use satellites. Okay. So there are those greenhouse gases that I was talking about. Carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere have been rising due to human activities, all right? And so we will talk more about that later. But if you look at the composition of gases in the atmosphere, the 2 most abundant gases, no doubt, are oxygen and nitrogen, okay? With nitrogen being making up the largest component of the atmosphere. Next, let's talk a little bit about the hydrosphere. Hydro is a Greek prefix meaning water. So the hydrosphere is made up of all of the water on the Earth, whether it be in oceans, lakes, glaciers, rivers, underground. It's all of the water on the planet. And now, an interesting fact here, we talk about conserving water and water conservation a lot. And I think many people have this idea of, this is the blue planet, right? Three quarters of the Earth's surface is covered in water. What in the world do we need to conserve water for? We have plenty of it, right? Well, what you need to understand here is that of all of that water on this planet, only 3% of it is actually fresh water, which is the water that we need to cook, to drink, to bathe, and things like that. 97% of the water on this planet is salt water, which is pretty much useless for many of our purposes. So, 3% fresh water. And if you break that down more, 70% of that 3% is trapped in glaciers and polar ice caps. Although we're doing a pretty good job at the moment of releasing that, but understand that, when 70% of your water is tied up in glaciers and polar ice caps, as those begin to melt, where does that water go? For the most part, especially if it's polar ice cap, it's heading into the ocean where it's going to become salt water. All right. So there's no doubt that we need to conserve our fresh water on this planet. Okay. Now, how do we study the hydrosphere? Well, we study the hydrosphere with things like deep sea vehicles, buoys, satellite images, diving suits, submersibles, and things like that. And an example of an interaction between the hydrosphere and the atmosphere would be that the oceans affect the atmosphere when warm or cold currents interact with wind currents. All right. So as the wind passes over a warm or a cool ocean current, the air above will pick up the properties of that, which would be cold and moist. So you'll have a cool, moist air mass moving in a particular direction. That's one way that the hydrosphere and the atmosphere interact. The third part of or the third Earth system that we're going to talk about is the biosphere. Bio is a Greek prefix meaning life. All right. So this includes all the life on the planet, whether it be in the air, in the water, or on land. So, how do we study the biosphere? Well, we can take pictures with satellites that can track yearly changes in plant and animal life, along with migratory patterns and things like that. We also have special equipment nowadays, high definition cameras, remote sensing equipment that allows scientists to study places without disrupting the ecosystem or without harming those areas. So we've made great improvements in our technology that allow us to study life on this planet. And a good example of the biosphere interacting with the atmosphere would be when trees exchange gases as they take in carbon dioxide and they release oxygen. They release oxygen in the process of photosynthesis. That interacts. All right. So that is a biosphere atmosphere interaction. The next part of the Earth system is the geosphere. Geo is a Greek prefix meaning land. So this is all features on the Earth's surface, which is the crust, and inside of the Earth, along with the mantle, the inner and outer cores. The geosphere is all that. All right. How do we study the geosphere? Well, we study it with satellite images. Sound waves or sonar can be used to map the geosphere under the oceans. Seismic waves are a really important idea in being able to study the geosphere, especially the parts of it underground that we can't see. We use a process called seismic tomography, where we actually use earthquake waves to get a picture. We'll use their arrival times at different seismic stations around the planet and then once we map the paths of those, we can get a very clear idea of what underneath the surface of the Earth, what is liquid, what is fluid, and what is solid. So seismic waves are very important in our understanding of especially the inner Earth. We can use computer models to study the geosphere, tectonic plate movements, mountain formation, things like that. And as matter moves from the geosphere to the atmosphere, in instances like volcanic explosions, all right, volcanic eruptions, you can get a whole lot of material coming from the geosphere, magma and lava, and those gases that are associated with them, especially carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide. Those can be thrown into the atmosphere in huge amounts during volcanic eruptions, so much so that they could even change the color of the sky. Okay, so the geosphere does definitely interact with the atmosphere, and we'll talk more later on about how it interacts with the other spheres. So, the final part of the Earth system that I want to introduce you to here is the anthrosphere. So, the anthrosphere is that part of the environment that is made or modified for use in human activities and habitats. So, the anthrosphere is basically the human footprint on this planet. It is the sphere of things that we have made, okay? Anthro being a Greek prefix meaning people. So, how do we study the anthrosphere? Well, mainly the anthrosphere has only been around for the last 10,000 years. It's associated closely with human civilization. So, we've seen big changes in the anthrosphere really over the last 100 years, especially with the ushering in of the Industrial Revolution and things like that. So, world population is also uh, something that we track that coincides with anthrospheric activity. Obviously, as population grows, so does the anthrosphere. And matter moves from the anthrosphere to the atmosphere when we burn fossil fuels in our power plants, and our factories, and even as we move around in our vehicles. Okay. So, all 5 parts of the Earth's system shape the planet's surface. Okay. Some will do it abruptly, but most of these changes take place over long, protracted periods of geologic time. And one example of an atmosphere hydrosphere interaction is not even the hardest rock can withstand the forces of wind and water. Over millions of years, rain, wind, and moving water and ice carved the Grand Canyon. Okay, so that's an excellent example of how the atmosphere and the hydrosphere have impacted the geosphere. Another good example would be land masses pushing together as continents drift, and they move. Earthquakes are set off, and volcanoes are formed in these tectonic plate boundary areas. We'll talk more about this, but areas like the Andes Mountains around the world are a result of land masses pushing together. Okay, in these geospheric processes. Right? Now, with the biosphere, plants and animals and humans, we've also changed the earth. Just walking or riding a bike over open land changes the surface of the planet. So if you look at the image that I have here, then, one thing that we will discuss in class at the end of this presentation is how does this picture show all 5 parts of the Earth system working together? How does it show the anthrosphere, the geosphere, the atmosphere, the hydrosphere, and the biosphere all working together to create the scenario that we see in this image? That's something that we'll be talking about soon. I hope that you found this presentation helpful as we introduce ourselves to the 5 Earth systems. Take care, and we'll see you in the next one.